So welcome to Conversations in Color. This is our podcast that is shared with those with whom we are in community with here at United Christian Parish. And so I always begin our podcast together by greeting our Director of Communications, Kate. I am grateful to you, as always, for your work that you do here, the important work here at United Christian Parish. This is just one among the many things that you do here at United Christian Parish in assisting me in producing this podcast. And as I share with each and every opportunity, the mission of Conversations in Color is to advance the story of United Christian Parish through this social platform that seeks to share my dialogue with people whom I cherish and who I certainly believe are well-respected leaders, offering their perspectives on the impact of their work as a solution to the important issues in our communities, in our world. And today it is my pleasure to welcome to Conversations in Color someone who I hold in the most highest of regards, Sandhya Jha. She is an author. She's a founder and former executive director of the Oakland Peace Center. Sandhya is an ordained pastor who holds a master's in public policy. She is also a core organizer trainer for reconciliation and anti-racism for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ Reconciliation Ministry. She is also someone that I'm looking forward to her sharing a bit more about Without Fear Consulting. And so without further ado, I want to say welcome, Sandhya, to our podcast today.
I am so grateful to be here. We have like 20 years of history together of doing the work of racial justice in the church, and I have learned so
how
much
old are
from
you, Sandhya? Like 26
25,
now?
yeah. I have learned so much from you over the years. I'm really grateful to get to talk with you.
Thanks, Sandhya. And you're doing this today, and we've been with you for a few minutes signing on. And so I'm not going to be surprised if once we say goodbye, when you stand up, we're going to see the handle of the suitcase probably as you're getting ready to jet off to somewhere else to lead, another workshop or something, because you're tremendous.
Fortunately, all my meetings are online today. So I'm in my PJs with a sweater thrown over top so no one can tell.
Well. And that looks like something delicious that you have there too.
I have some herbal tea that's taking good care of me.
What type? Because I know that you have.
Oh yeah, this is from Inspire. It's called Silver and Spice.
Silver and Spice.
Isn't that fancy?
I like that. I like that. And some point soon, I hope that we can sit together and hear, sometimes we also, well, I don't know about you, Sandhya, but sometimes I also have something else in my cup, but we won't.
I've been with you when that's been true. Do you mean coffee, Marcus?
Yeah, coffee.
I thought so. Oh, I thought so.
Think of coffee. Yeah. So it's our intent, Sandhya, the first question, though I think I've already broken all the rules about that, but usually the first question with our podcast is I invite our guests to this question, would you rather? And so this is a segment that I remember with my kids when they were much younger, and we would play this game where I would share with them two scenarios, and they would have to make a decision between one of those two scenarios that were provided. Sometimes neither of the two scenarios provided seemed any good or fun. And sometimes both of the scenarios provided seemed especially good. But the task with them was always the same, and so it's going to be with you as well. You can only choose one of the two possible scenarios. So that's why we call this Would You Rather? Are you ready to play?
I am ready.
All right. So Shonda, which of these two scenarios would you rather? You are stuck in traffic somewhere there in Oakland. I don't know the highways that are there, but you're stuck there.
I'm definitely stuck on the 880.
On the 880
Yeah.
for 7 minutes as you share an Uber. With whom would you rather share the ride? The Reverend Shunji Nishi, PhD, or Ali Wong, comedian? Your answer and the follow-up question to your answer is tell us why.
That is a deep track, Shunji Nishi. Wow. You know what's hilarious? Because like both of them would be amazing.
You have to tell us who
Yeah.
because someone may know who he is.
So Shunji Nishi, who is a theologian, studied under Tillich, was really active in the free speech movement in Berkeley, played a really important role in fostering dialogue among the kind of emerging, Asian rights and Black rights and Latinx and Indigenous rights movements in the seminary context. I love that. That's so great. Somebody I would want to be like, right? Except I'm not as brave as all that, because there was a lot of flack to take for the kind of work he was doing.
He was an innovator. He was a changer, a game changer.
Yeah.
I knew that somehow you were gonna have that connection. But is that who you would share the ride with?
I don't know, man, because 7 minutes is not enough.
Well, who's Ali Wong? I mean, you gotta. Who's
Ali Wong is a comedian who will make you laugh till you cry, and she's amazing. She actually helped write the screenplay for like the first romantic comedy featuring 2 Asian Americans. She is unapologetic about who she is. Like the first big comedy hit she had was she was like 8 months pregnant while she's on stage. Like you can watch it on Netflix.
Yes.
It's not everybody's taste. She gets a little bit graphic about the sex. She uses some curse words. And that's the other thing.
What church people don't do that, right?
They just don't want to admit it though. So what I love about her is she destroys all of the stereotypes about Asian women, right?
Yes.
And so like, I don't know, you said like it was going to be an impossible choice, so that's fair. But I think the only reason I'm going to go with Ali Wong is 7 minutes with Shunji Nishi. I'd be like, this was not enough. It is not fair. Whereas comedians have a short shelf life. Like you get about 15 minutes out of them and you're like, oh, that was more than enough. Are you going home now? So I'm going with Ali Wong because 7 minutes would be just enough where I'm like, I got a good story to tell some people. I laughed real hard, and then she went home. Yeah.
And the thing that I recall about Ali Wong, one of the things she said was, if a comedian cannot speak with emotion, then she doesn't have that. She doesn't see that as someone that she wants to be in the presence of.
Yeah, absolutely. She is grounded in the fullness of who she is and thinks comedy needs to be. Yeah,
and I thought about you.
I love that.
I've not ever been in a meeting or a workshop where we talk about the issues around all of these things: human sexuality, human rights issues, issues around race, equity, and inclusion, where the passion in Sandhya Jha is not there.
Oh, thank you, friend. I really appreciate that.
So,
also, just as an aside, did you see the article where there was an announcement in one of the newspapers that Ali Wong and her husband were breaking up, which was devastating because her last comedy show was about how great her husband was. But they used a picture of her with a different Asian man. with her
Wait.
co-star from the movie she was in.
Was that the
And
reason for the
labeling-
divorce? Was that the reason for the divorce?
No, my point is,
I mean,
point is, they were like,
you know, if they say how great Tammy's husband is, and then they have, you know, I don't
Denzel.
know, Denzel Washington,
Morgan-
yeah, or Morgan, you know, I mean, I might be insulted too.
But it happened after. So they're announcing the divorce and they show a picture of her with someone that they label as her husband, who was actually her co-star, because all Asians look the same.
Ah, yeah.
It was wild.
Yeah. I get mistaken for Denzel Washington
All
every
the
day.
time. Well,
Every day.
I mean, it's confusing anytime we go into a training. People are like, how come Denzel's leading this training? It's
Yeah. There you go.
I do have to say, in our denomination, I have been mistaken for Jessica Vasquez, who is about the same size as me, is about the same skin tone as me, is Puerto Rican where I'm Indian.
Right.
But like and I know that the mistakes happen because they say, oh, we remember your bright pink hair. And I'm like, Jessica had bright pink hair. I never did.
Yeah.
So that's happened, but
it's the eyeglasses. The eyeglasses.
But they've also mistaken me for April Luton, who is a very petite Filipina. We look nothing alike. Nothing alike. Now, I will say April gets very offended by this. And I understand, like, I'm offended on principle, but she shouldn't be so angry that people think we're the same person. I'm not that bad.
I know you're.
Yeah. But she gets very angry. She's like, I am not Shonda. And it's not just about the racial stereotyping.
Let me make this perfectly clear. You know, but there's some mistakes that happen, and you know, and I have to be honest, I've made mistakes before where I've looked at a particular person, you know, and I've thought, weren't you, you know, but I do think there should be some intentionality as well in terms of seeing people, you know, seeing people.
Yeah, we make mistakes. It is scientifically documented that we unintentionally categorize people who are different than us in different parts of our brain. We have to work to overcome that. But we get to choose to work to overcome it.
Amen.
Yeah.
If you're posting for a media story though, you should get the husband right.
Thank you. Yes, it is. You have one job as a photojournalist.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And this is coming from certainly someone who knows. And that's part of why I appreciate Kate so much and what she does and what she knows, you know. So Kate, who would you choose?
I love this.
I don't know. That's not fair because I'm not familiar with either of them.
I think,
to be honest, so that's my
often
cop-out.
But no, that's often the case in an Uber. So that doesn't mean you can't make the choice. You rarely know your conversation partner in an Uber.
Nope. I remember sitting in an Uber. This was before the pandemic, and I was sitting in there. I had the cup from Starbucks. I had just gotten off the metro from the Wheatley Western metro station, and the first question the other person sitting in the Uber with me, they were asking, because I said that I was coming to UCP. And the first question that they asked me, they said, is that the church with the engineers? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I've driven past that church before. And, you know, she was just commenting about the structure of it, and she admired it. But she said this church had been known for a number of years because a lot of the scientists and engineers attended this church.
Wow.
And she said that she had always felt a little bit intimidated. And so I said, well, you don't have to be intimidated. if they have me there, trust me, you can come. And we just laughed, and she honestly did. She visited one Sunday. I saw her face, I recognized her, you know, and we laughed, you know.
I love that.
But it's the thing about, you never fully understand, you know, that sense of how you perceived and what it means to have those relationships. And so I think that is one of the important things about what we're doing with the podcast, with the outreach, with our theme summer worship series, Won't You Be My Neighbor? This way of just trying to reach out and sometimes reintroduce yourself to the community and to people. So, and as a matter of fact, Shonda, you know, none of these were scripted that we've been talking about here, but this one is.
Although I do want it noted for the record that Kate totally copped out on that question.
Did she? Let's put a note there.
I got a pass.
Put an asterisk there. Though I do think Kate would have a great conversation with either one. I would love to eavesdrop with the conversation between Kate and Ali Wong. I would love to eavesdrop on that conversation. But the podcast, Shonda, is called Conversations in Color.
Yeah.
And it is because of the metaphor that describes in-depth conversations that have a lasting impact with us, ways of having a definite way of an effect upon our lives. Do you remember your first conversation in color? And if so, do you remember who it was with?
Yeah, so the first conversation like that is seared into my brain, interestingly enough, was with a colleague of my father's who was an argumentarian, right? He just loved to argue for the sake of arguing. And I was in junior high, and I was the perfect kind of, you know, everyone else had given up on him by that point in time. They would just let him make his ridiculous arguments, and then they would let him keep talking until he was arguing the other side, because no one would engage him. So he ended up debating himself. And my mother was like, that was much funnier. Once you came along and decided to start engaging him, he was actually trying to have real conversations, and that was much less fun. So I remember
it had to be interesting watching therapy and process.
I know, right? Totally. And I remember one of those times, and I was in junior high and deeply religious, and deeply committed, if you'll forgive me, y'all can edit this out if it's helpful, but deeply committed to a pro-life position. It seemed so clear and so uncomplicated to me at that stage in my life. And I don't, to this day, I have no idea whether Professor Ellis was pro-life or pro-choice, but he decided to have a conversation where he's like, so here's the actual impact of that position. Here's what actually happens to people when that's the law of the land. Are you not concerned about X, Y, and Z? Are you not concerned about the fact that it's going to happen anyhow, and more lives will be lost? And I'm not saying that shifted my position in one fell swoop, and it's not even the conversation about pro-life versus pro-choice that's important about it to me. It was the first conversation I remember somebody saying, let's complicate that. All you've got so far is the media narrative about one clear side versus one other clear side. And the world is not just about bright lines. The world is about a lot of messiness and complexity. And so, again, I'm not necessarily talking about the issue so much as somebody modeling that worldview for me actually made me a much more deeply faithful person.
Mm-hmm. I think from Shonda, when I was in seminary, which was ages ago now, and the conversations around, you know, pro-choice and these kinds of things, and the gift of being in in diversity, being in the midst of diversity,
Mm-hmm.
was we had a rabbi who was with us as we were engaging in at one time in this conversation. And the rabbi said, as Protestants and those who are, you know, in the Christian sphere of this argument, the rabbi said, we're in another sphere. And what we're trying to help families with our congregations is the creation that happens in terms of when couples have challenges of being able to conceive, and what the Torah says in terms of the creation, you know, of life from the beginning. And so where do we begin with that conversation? And so that kind of, so to speak, not having that compartmentalized place to simply say, here is the perception that I have is clear, you know, as that saying, cut and dry kind of thing. God has so many places that God's voice needs to be heard, and where people need to be healed and set free. And I would love it if the church could find a way to make room for people instead of making excuses that just simply push them further away.
Yeah. Amen.
You talked about something in one of your books, Shonda, pre-post racial America, right? And I wanted to read this just a bit, and then I wanted to maybe just have your thoughts about, because one of the things that Reverend Nishi did for the world, right? Some people may be familiar with the late author Ronald Takaki. It was Reverend Nishi that encouraged this great author, Ronald Takaki, who would go on to write about the experiences of Asian peoples in this country, the United States. And one of the books we use often when we do our workshops around reconciliation is one of his books, Strangers from a Different Shore. But Takaki writes about the experiences of those, particularly in Hawaii, and the plantations that the people, particularly the Asian population, working on those sugarcane plantations, and that had a great influence upon his life, and the way that he was able to communicate life and these values that he learned. But it was Reverend Nishi that inspired him to not give up the skateboarding, or I'm sorry, the surfing, but to just put the surfboard aside a few hours and to go to college. Yeah. And so that was another reason why I mentioned it.
I don't think I knew that particular connection. And Ron Takaki is one of my heroes. He's part of the reason I wrote Room at the Table.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I may not get back around to it, but I love the introduction that you wrote to this book. She's one of my favorite, Shawanda Adichie, you know, the danger of a single story. Yep. Which is how I really want to try and live my life, in terms of being aware that everyone has a story. And as we were saying earlier, to see those stories, to take the time to listen to those stories. But I want to get to this because I know, as he said, we want to keep you but you were writing about the story that's told in the Gospel of John, chapter 5. It's the story of the invalid or the paraplegic who was lying by the pool and basically wanting to be into the pool. And the fact that sometimes we offer our excuses before we recognize that we're at the healing stage. And though sometimes maybe we're in between the healing stage, which means we're still very cognizant of our wounds. But I wanted you to just say a little bit about that, because again, talking about community, and that's our summer series theme in terms of being neighbors to each other. But in your book on page 106, you write this. You said that about the person, Jesus. He leads with his wounds, the person does, and with the many ways he has been stopped from getting to those healing waters. That's what we do when we're still in the healing stage and don't even know it. We lead with our wounds. I have previously used this passage to talk about congregational transformation. I've talked about how Jesus doesn't care much about our excuses. He just wants to know if we seriously, really want to be healed. But in listening, I find myself thinking about the ways communities of color stay wounded, maybe not even realizing we're still in the healing stage and don't even know it. And Jesus knows what that's like. He's from a community on the margins, not treated well at all by the empire that's suppressing them, and a community also that picks at itself from the inside, so that the poorest of the poor suffer even more. We often blame communities of color for that. A recent internet meme said, "We talk about people of color acting like crabs in a barrel, pulling each other down so the other crabs won't escape, without discussion of the fact that a barrel is not the natural environment for a crab." What happens between people of color does not happen in a vacuum. It happens in the thick smog of white supremacy that we all breathe every day, usually without realizing that it is in our lungs, all of us. Powerful words that you wrote, Shonda. What does that mean for churches that are wanting to build communities, to reach out to neighbors? Not just the ones that look like them, but all neighbors.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the churches I work with are really interested, and for all of the right reasons, are really interested in diversity. And I mean, I think something I learned with you and from you over the years was actually creating a culture as a community might be a necessary precursor, because inviting people into a place that is going to eventually do them harm is not something we're conscious we're always doing. You know, it's really interesting because as you were reading that, I was thinking, oh, the work I've done with the disability justice community over the last, I'd say 10 years, 5 years, more intentionally, has me reading the whole Bible differently, because there are so many ways in which we're trained to read the Bible in very ableist ways. Ableist just meaning not recognizing the ways we benefit from a culture that serves those of us who are non-disabled at the expense of people with disabilities.
Yes.
And so even as I revisited that passage as you were sharing that story, I found myself thinking, what if that guy was trying to say to Jesus, I need you to hear how messed up this system is. No matter what I do, I can't get into the water first because the people with resources get their people into the water first. I've been trying for years. I have been doing everything I am physically capable of doing, and nothing has made a difference. And I hope this doesn't sound heretical, but there's a tiny part of me as I'm thinking about this from a disability justice perspective. I'm thinking, what if what he was actually looking for from Jesus was an acknowledgement that this system is messed up. This system where rich people can get access to healthcare and poor people can't, where people who are non-disabled are able to navigate systems in ways that people with disabilities cannot. What if what he was actually looking for from Jesus was, dude, you're right, this system is a mess. We got to change this system. That was not what you were getting at, but I think, I mean,
no. I mean,
it's not what I was getting at.
The scripture explicitly says he had been in that place for 38 years.
38 years. It's not like he hadn't been trying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I find myself thinking, to your question, I wonder whether some of our work as we long to connect with our neighbors is to say, what does our community need to be in order to be responding to the experiences of our neighbors before we even invite them in the door? And I don't mean to make that sequential. I think it can all happen simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I also think it's really important to be listening to the voices of people on whatever, who are historically unserved. To be listening to those voices to shape what the community looks like. And that means needing folks to be in the room, but to also create a culture that recognizes in the places where someone else has lived experience, they need to be helping shape what the space looks like, how we gather, what kinds of meetings we have, how our board meetings are run. And that's about race and generation and culture and language, physical accessibility. There's a lot of folks out here who are trying to figure out how to create spaces that are more welcoming to people who are, the term is neurodivergent, whose brains don't work in the ways that our dominant culture says is the only kind of thinking they want in the room.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
All of that gets to be some of our work, I think.
The work is endless, and I think about what would it have meant if I had walked past the person that has been sitting on that bench or living in that tent or whatever that circumstance might have been.
Yeah.
And I've been walking past that person, that community for 38 years. And I'm saying, I want to invite you to United Christian Parish. And I've been walking past them for 38 years and never seeing who they are, what they're experiencing, how they might be suffering, what needs and resources that they have perhaps have been asking for 38 years.
Yeah.
What kind of neighbor have I been?
Yeah.
Donna, one of my mentors and a dear friend who's possibly one of yours, Dr. Jan Lynn, has said that feelings are like the ocean's waters and emotions are the waves rising above the surface of those waters. Can you describe the feelings that inspired you to create both the Oakland Peace Center and Without Fear Consulting?
So the Oakland Peace Center I was pastoring First Christian Church of Oakland, and we had some conversation about what that congregation wanted to contribute to the community. And they said what they got out of being at that church was an experience of peace. And that in Oakland, they wanted to contribute to peace in the midst of violence. And so we started volunteering as a congregation with the organizations that were doing work to disrupt violence in our community. And in the course of that work with these different nonprofit leaders, some of whom were one-person shops, some of whom had like 5 folks, I got this sense of longing. My own longing to be more connected and more supported in trying to do this work. And my sense that that longing wasn't just mine, that the folks who were on the front lines of the work to dismantle violence in Oakland also were feeling isolated and alone and overwhelmed by the task. And so longing's maybe a strange feeling to name, but I think that in many ways was what drove the creation of the Oakland Peace Center, which is a collective of nonprofits sharing space and sharing connection to help each other get better and help each other survive what's hard about that frontlines work. I think without fear consulting, it was a different feeling. So a couple of weeks after George Floyd was murdered, a friend of mine who is a union organizer and just a powerhouse of a human being, and also a New Yorker, so she cuts to the chase. She says things like they are, right? And she said to me, Shonda, you've been messing around with the Oakland Peace Center for 10 years, and I just don't see what it's doing, which is unfair. It did a lot of things. It just didn't get legislation passed, and therefore she saw it as useless. Because she's a union organizer, right? But
love to meet her.
I know you would love her. But what she said was, we actually need you to do what you're good at right now. Black anti-racism and DEI consultants are stretched beyond their capacity, and I cannot right now recommend white DEI consultants. You need to show up.
Shonda, tell us
diversity,
DEI.
sorry, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you very much. She said, I need you to alleviate the burden from your Black friends and to step in where your white friends can't. I need you to do what you're actually good at, which is anti-racism work. And I brushed her off because I was like, the Oakland Peace Center can't do without me. And then I sat with it and realized, no, they actually can. And we built out a system over the next few months. And
but wasn't that beautiful to know, though, that you had been a part of something that has that life, and that it has that sustainability?
Yeah, they're doing great without me. In fact, there are things that have happened because I left, which was maybe the best feeling I could possibly imagine. That actually my leaving positioned them to do things that unconsciously I might have been getting in the way of. Not that I was doing a bad job, but that was exciting.
That's another conversation on leadership for us right there, Shonda. To know and to have that and to know what that means, and to some people can never get to that kind of a maturity.
Right.
As leaders.
Oh, nonprofit founders have the nonprofit founder syndrome is a thing that people in the development world talk about, which is founders hanging on way longer than they should and misdirecting the organization because they just can't let go. I wanted to make sure I didn't do that, so it felt really good. And spending all of my time doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work with nonprofits, with religious organizations, sometimes even with corporations, with higher education institutions, it is so life-giving because all those decades of community organizing turn out to make me a very different DEI consultant. And all of those years of pastoring turn out to make me a very different kind of DEI consultant, so that people feel held and people get equipped and empowered to carry the work on themselves without me. And I gotta say, I feel really proud of what I'm contributing in that space. It's daunting work, but it feels really good. It really does.
Yeah, as you should. And I saw this progression, not every
you trained me how to do some of this work.
I was in the room, Shonda.
Liar.
So with the last few minutes that we have, and Kate and I are grateful. So before I ask my last question. Kate, there are some things that in the work of violence that we've seen in our communities that can just continue, with the, I can't recall the number that, but I think it's already almost doubled, I think, in terms of gun violence and what we've seen from 2021 here in some places in our area. What would you see Kate and I doing together with this podcast that could help speak to some of the issues in terms of our community and here in this area that you have familiarity with here in this capital area, as far as the violence and what churches could do to be partners or to somehow participate in what you've been doing to try to counteract this violence in our communities?
I gotta say, part of what was really important for us at First Christian Church of Oakland was to recognize we needed to be in relationship with folks all across that continuum, because we had chosen that as the thing we were going to focus on. And so we were in relationship with folks who had lost people to violence and had set up a feeding program so that no one in our neighborhood needed to turn to violence when they could turn to Project Darius. We were working with the urban peace movement, which was making sure that conflict wasn't quite what was going on in Oakland, but conflict connected youth had resources to find a different path out of that. In that instance, particularly through music, but also through public speaking training and entrepreneurship training and all of those kinds of things. Yeah. We worked with a woman from the Gaddafi Foundation, named after her son, Gaddafi Washington, who had been shot in the streets, who would show up at the house of a family where someone had been killed within minutes. And she would de-escalate so that there wasn't retaliatory violence. We worked, and I have mixed feelings about this one, but one of the most effective programs that we worked with was something called Operation Ceasefire. And it was launched 3 different times in Oakland before it actually worked. And it was a connection between faith communities, the police, and social service providers. And it was developed specifically to focus on the people who were 80% of the violent crimes in Oakland were instigated by 20% of the people who were part of those various gangs. And so it was focused on helping them realize the impact of the harm they were doing. So there would be call-ins where the police would round them up, bring them in to meet with the mothers of the people they had killed. And the mothers would say, here's what my life is like because of what you did. And then the social service providers would say, you don't have to keep doing this. Here's what we can provide you instead. In fact, in Richmond, just north of us, Richmond, California, they were actually paying people to not be in gangs. That was very controversial, and it did work. We could talk about that more. And then the police would say, and we need you to understand the rules, because right now it all seems very arbitrary to you. But if you use a certain kind of bullet, it's a federal offense. We need you to understand that you will get sent away for decades. And so we need you to be clear. It feels random, but here are the laws. And when you violate these laws, here's what happens. So kind of a carrot stick thing. And the pastors would show up in the hospitals after someone had been shot to provide pastoral care and to help them find another path out. So anyhow.
Shauna, did you find many pastors who were willing to be there at least to attempt to be there before those actual shootings, to try and be present before the violence escalated? And if so, in what way?
So there were night walks where clergy and lay people would walk through neighborhoods with high rates of violence on Friday and Saturday nights, just to say hi, just to say we're in the neighborhood, just to say, hey, we're your friends. If anything's going on, you can talk to us, but also to signal to folks who were involved in violent crime, we're holding you accountable. You're part of this community. We're part of this community. We need you to see us, because so often the church has no footprint in the community except on Sunday mornings. And so being present at the times that people were actually gathering outside, which was Friday and Saturday nights, that was shifting things. It was incredibly successful until a major glitch with the pandemic. And we're watching crime go up, but crime had been steadily decreasing in Oakland, in no small part thanks to that program. And yeah, there were a lot of clergy and lay people. It wasn't just a clergy thing, but there were particularly Black clergy in the call-ins with the folks who were most prone to violence. And people walking the neighborhoods were from the neighborhoods and were, again, clergy and lay people.
Mm-hmm. Shonda, that reminds me of a friend of ours who's passed away now, William Chris Hobgood. Mm-hmm. And I remember when he talked about being one of those pastors who would walk the streets in Alexandria, Virginia. I think the school is going to be renamed. It was T.C. Williams High School at the time, but it's going to be renamed because, of course, the history of that individual who the school was named for was actually a segregationist, but Alexandria City High School. But how he was one of those pastors who would walk and try to help those students to become more acclimated with each other when they had integrated that high school. Of course, the movie Remember the Titans.
Yes.
And so he was one of those. Yeah. And so I think that there was no, so to speak, accident that you and I, our paths crossed, because the people that have been in our lives have been those kinds of people.
Yep.
And somehow those people organically have a way of bringing people with these kinds of shared values together, getting us into the room together so that we can hear each other. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you. How can we support Without Fear Consulting? How can listeners to the podcast, if they want to find out more, they can certainly go online, but also from you, what are some of the ways that we can support Without Fear Consulting?
I'd honestly be thrilled if people signed up for my newsletter. So if you went to withoutfearconsulting.com, there's a link to sign up for the newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter called Joy in Justice. That's about how we can incorporate some of these values into our workplaces, and how that doesn't have to be just out of a sense of obligation and drudgery and it's the right thing, but actually it can be very life-giving to do this work in the workplace. I would love to have people connect with me there.
Well, Kate has already gotten us signed up, and you know, as I said, you know, she just keeps all of us, you know, on the right track here. So
well, I'll definitely promote that when I promote this podcast, when I get it up, and then show notes and
that's
stuff
awesome.
like that. And thank you, and thank you for your energy and inspiring me in the past hour or so.
Thank you.
I know you said it was daunting, but you're still so passionate and energetic.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we just got to have you here at UCP so we can be in the same room, not just sharing boxes on the screen.
I would love that.
We've got to do that. And your smile just lights up, you know, everything. So just beautiful person inside and out. Thanks, Shonda.
Such a gift to be with you. Thanks so much.
Okay. We'll talk to you soon.